Hello there, my name is Mark Frasco. I'm the founder and president of Coact Associates. Thank you for joining me today. Business Builders is a series that we've put together mostly for business leaders, business growth leaders, and those practitioners who work in their organizations primarily on attracting new business into their systems. Today, we put this together especially for some of our customers in the metal fab market and some of the prospects that we've been working with over the years. I'm a speaker at FabTech. This will be my 5th year, I think, and so I'll be speaking on November 7th. And we thought it would be interesting to cover a topic that's a pretty typical topic with our clients in this sector. And we talk about the concentration of their customer portfolios and the ability that they have, or the strategies that they are trying to implement to diversify some of those. And we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons and things that make concentrated customer profiles good, and sometimes where we really need to look at diversification. So, let's dig in, and we'll take a little bit of look at this industry first of all. The metal fab industry, by definition, pretty large market, $42 billion in revenues, profit about 1.8 billion, as you can see. Wages make up about a fourth of that revenue, and 18,000 of you out there. So there's a good number of competitors in the field, and we'll learn a little bit about that. Pretty much geographically centered around those popular population centers where there's a lot of manufacturing. Probably the most interesting stat for us, and this comes from IBIS Research. We subscribe to this tool that gives us a breakdown of a few hundred SIC codes. Probably the most interesting aspect of this is about 3% growth is projected over the next 5 years in this industry, 3% per year. You can see industry revenues really have recovered very nicely from lows in 2015 and 16, popping back up, really aggressive growth, 7-8%. This past year, and kind of leveling out, as I said, in that 3% range, a little bit lower as you go out a little bit further. The major markets, obviously, people who are fabricators tend to use these organizations more than any other group. The industrial machinery and equipment group, a lot of automotive and transportation, aerospace and so forth, electronics, and then a miscellaneous with some medical in there. So the market is dominated pretty much by the fabricated metal folks in industrial machinery and equipment, and then automotive transportation. If you look at where the businesses are located and how concentrated they are, you can see that the Great Lakes region is a pretty heavy competitive area. And again, it goes along with centers of manufacturing. So it's no surprise, actually, that California, a very large state, has some manufacturing base that's obviously been populated by a lot of competitors. Other than the Great Lakes region, you can see Texas, but also if you dig into the numbers a little bit, you'll see Southeast and Southwest. Southeast, and those spots, those states adjacent to Texas are starting to grow. And you'll see this when you look at the populations of the various centers and the number of establishments in those populated areas. So, looking at Great Lakes again, you'll see that the establishments sort of far outstrip the population. That's not the case in the Southwest and Southeast. You can see that there's some potential there. And then lastly, I like this chart, which shows the volatility of the industry. It's a relatively steady industry, this metal fab market, pretty predictable with the economic cycles. When the economy is doing well, they tend to do better. As far as 5-year annualized growth, it's a little bit, that line represents where GDP is, or average industrial growth. So it's a little bit below that. So the industry itself grows at a little bit slower pace. So let's talk a little bit about concentration, versus diversification. I think at first glance, everybody thinks about diversification as a strategy. In finance, they teach us that portfolio diversification reduces risk, and it does. But what I think is very interesting about that is that concentration of a customer portfolio or a portfolio isn't necessarily always more risk. I mean, if you thinking about investment, if you will, for a minute, if you were to go back to say 2000, 2005, in those days, well, NASDAQ was going kind of crazy. The technology market was booming. And if you were an investor and you were diversifying your portfolio, it was probably underperforming. So there are times when a concentrated portfolio is useful, but it does, a concentrated portfolio will increase your risk if you're not in the right spots. So diversification of your customer portfolio is always an interesting strategy, and one that is useful and can be, and we'll talk about it a little bit, can be disruptive. Timing also in markets and trying to attract and bring customers in is really everything. But our ability to time the market, the economy, buying cycles are really mixed at best. So I think one of the variables that needs to be eliminated in a business growth process as you're trying to diversify your client base is that variable of timing. So you need to be there top of mind. Your brand needs to be building awareness on a regular basis if you have any hope of finding new customers and bringing them into your portfolio. You've probably all seen this, but I decided to throw it in because I think it's a useful conversation. When you think about when is the right time, and again, I think regardless of the stage that your organization is in, whether you're a startup or you're in this, what I call stage 2, kind of the growth stage, even if it's 3, 4, 5% a year, you've learned how to make money. You've learned the types of products that you can supply. You've learned the types of customers who tend to buy those products that you supply based on the machine that you have, based on that manufacturing process that you own. So this stage 2 is this growth stage is where we really begin to think about, are we a little bit too concentrated, and should we be diversifying? Therefore, eliminating the opportunity, if you will, or the occurrence of plateauing, if you will. So, what we're all trying to avoid is this stage 4 where you go into decline. So startups, most startups start with one client. So if you go back to your history, whatever that was, 40, 60, 80 years ago, at one point, the organization probably started with one client, one customer. And they began to diversify your portfolio. You learned how to do what you do. You started to grow the business. And some organizations, you'd be surprised how many, about 25% of our business is in this metal fab industry. And so we work on strategy and structure, business growth process with a lot of people in this market. And I would say more than half of them anyway report that they feel like their customer base is overly concentrated and they're trying to diversify. So you've got to get through this period and into renewal. And that's not easy. It's one thing to have a strategy to diversify your customer base, but it's quite another to build the structures and processes, get the dedicated people aligned to do that. So, on the left, obviously, is a more concentrated customer list, if you were, if these bars were to represent revenue. So three customers make up what looks like about 80% of the business, which is, again, not too uncommon for some in the industry. A more diversified portfolio looks like this one on the bottom right. So again, it takes different sort of organizational structures. The organization behaves differently based on its concentration or diversification of client base. It takes different competencies, sometimes different tools to accomplish these, culturally, to accomplish these structures. So let's take a look at this real quick and look on the XY axis here. If you look at the portfolio strategy maybe that you have against the organizational characteristic, what it really takes to operate successfully a concentrated portfolio or begin to diversify that portfolio. If you look at the x-axis and you think, on a continuum from, usually if you're thinking about a concentrated strategy and you're really good at it and you know what you do, you know who you do it with, you've got 4 or 5 clients that make up 80%. Maybe it's the old Pareto's law, right? The 20% of your customers make up 80% of your revenue. It's kind of the same with the shapes and sizes that you make. There's probably a limited number that make up most of your revenue. Well, this is all about optimization, making the best or most effective use of your resource. So it's like optimizing the manufacturing plant that you have, the machines that you have, the people that you have, and those competencies. So a concentrated strategy is all about optimization. On the other hand, in a more diversification strategy, if you really have the structures in place and the people in place, and you have the manufacturing portfolio, if you will, the machinery to diversify your client base, it takes more innovation a little bit, new products, methods, derivations of what you're doing today. You almost need to embrace that. So on the concentration side, there's a lot more certainty, right? Diversification, a lot less certainty. Sometimes this drives us a little crazy, right? Because we know what we know, and we know with the 3, 4, 5, 8 clients that we have that make up 80% of our revenue, with certainty, we have some contracts and releases and certain things. And so in that particular case, concentration along with optimization can be a really successful strategy. Again, there might be some risk associated with it based on your contracts, the length of those contracts, when they're expiring and so forth. But that certainty can be there in a concentrated portfolio. So, as you try to implement more thinking around diversification, of course, there's less certainty in the market. You're out there talking with people you haven't done work with. They're asking for things that you don't always do. So there's a lot less certainty, and sometimes that causes angst in the organization. And these dollar signs are really just meant to relatively get your head around the fact that in a diversification strategy, obviously there's a lot more money out there than there is in your concentrated portfolio. So there's great potential in that 40-something billion dollar market that's out there. So you're used to working in this particular subset of customers that you work with on certain parts, and the uncertainty of going for that diversification strategy and trying to bring more diverse clients and customers into your portfolio, there's obviously a lot of potential out there. And we'll talk about how to narrow that down. So now, if you think about the organizational characteristic, again, this concentrated portfolio, this strategy, it's all around efficiency, price reductions. You invest in embracing standards. So you've got a way that you do everything that optimizes the most useful outcomes of what it is that you have, your people, again, your machines, processes, and so forth. So this organization, this culture, the way we hire, the way we train, the way we think is all about efficiency in this concentration strategy. Things are certain, we know what we're doing, and we know how to drive cost out of our manufacturing processes, how we buy, how we move work through the plant, and get it to our customers. In the more diversified strategy, it's more about adaptability, problem-solving investment. You've got to embrace the variables there. You can't, what makes you successful in a strategy with 4 or 6 customers is not necessarily going to make you successful when you begin to diversify your portfolio. So culturally, it's a little bit different in the way you bid on things, who you bid them for, how fast you do that. There's certain muscles that you need to build around diversification that may not exist in a real concentrated strategy. And I think it's underestimated when many people begin to try to diversify their customer portfolio. It's really underestimated the structural implications, the cultural implications to the organization. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I like to think that diversification, as you think about getting through, the growth cycle and kind of plateauing and getting into that revitalization, if you will, is sort of positive disruption to your organization. Um, of course, it's positive things. You're out in the market, you're learning new things. There's needs that are developing that you're not used to looking at. And I think it causes you to think and learn and apply new ways of thinking. So I consider that to be positively disruptive. On the other side, again, when you're in the concentrated, you're working with 3, 4, 5 clients, it's standard operating procedure. You know what you're doing. They know you, you know them. It's pretty straightforward. So again, this slide is meant to get you to think about, one, there's a lot of potential out there, but two, that the cultural characteristics, the structure, processes that make you successful with 4 or 6 customers, with a limited number of SKUs that you might make in that scenario, are very different structures, very different cultures, a lot of times, processes, when you begin to try to diversify your customer base. So what we've learned over the years, and we just celebrated our 15th anniversary last week, we do work in the business to business market. Like I said, about 25% of our business is in this metal fab industry. What we've learned is over the years that selling success, so this diversification concept, this diversification strategy that we're trying to implement, is due to far more than technique. It's the design and implementation of a process that proactively, rhythmically communicates your value propositions to strategic targets, while building trusting relationships. This regular interaction allows you to build social capital, build trusting relationships with buyers and their buying systems, which eventually leads us to understand better a prospect's motivation to buy. So it's a lot to look at, so I break it down, but suffice it to say that business growth is not much different than any other of the core processes in your organization, whether it's, again, buying metal, work in process, shipping, customer service. Business growth is very similar to those things. It is a process that needs to be implemented and monitored, rhythmically communicating your value propositions, what makes you different in the market, what can you overtly say to the market that you do that others have had a really hard time saying the same and competing in that space. And saying it to strategic targets, I think today we have a tendency to think that 10,000, 20,000, everybody in the world is a strategic target because we have email marketing and we just blast stuff out. I really don't think so. I think you need to decide who it is you want to do business with and go make friends with them. It should be strategic and it should be closely aligned to your value propositions. Again, the things that position you uniquely in the market, choosing who it is you want to do business with and go out and make friendships with them and build trusting relationships with them. As that happens, you've done this, that you begin to learn about how they like things, how they buy, who they buy from, how much they buy, in what sort of framework do they place their orders, and then of course you'll understand their motivation. So really important. It all starts with a kind of a process orientation, which most of you are really good at, or you wouldn't be in business. The metal fab industry is as process oriented as any group that we work with. And it's somewhat fascinating to me that not so much on the business growth side, which I'm hoping that today will plant a few seeds to help you think about the process of growing your business. So if you take the sales continuum from 0 to 10, and 10 is making money, around a 7, you would issue a proposal, make an offer, do a quote. 8, you get the work, do the work. 9, make money. So on this 7, proposal to 10, I call this the supply side of your business. On the supply side of your business, the characteristics are very unique. You have dedicated people doing jobs, from estimating projects to purchasing the raw materials, get the machine set up, doing the work, and making money. You have dedicated people, organization charts. They're trained, educated many times for particularly what they're doing. Processes, as I said earlier, in most of your shops, pretty well refined. Again, it's really hard for you guys to make money. It's really hard for you to stay in business if you don't have solid processes in place on how you move stuff through the system. So on the supply side, dedicated people, robust processes, and performance management systems. So key performance indicators, dashboards. You're keeping track of things that are important to the business as the products are moving through your plant. The supply side, what I'm trying to depict for you is there's a lot of specificity. There's an enormous amount of detail in what you do. But when you look at the demand side, if you're thinking about diversifying your client base, it's pretty hard to do it without that same sort of orientation. On the demand side, we often do not have dedicated people in place or processes or any sort of performance management system in place. So we're going to talk about that today. And these micro systems, if you will, like you have micro systems on the supply side, as I said, purchasing and various stages of work in process and tooling and shipping, those are all micro processes of the supply side. Well, on the demand side, we've already talked about it a little bit. You have strategy. So you have strategic processes that you need to go through, and we're going to talk about that in a second. You need to be able to research who it is you want to do business with, design value proposition and messaging that you're going to send out to the market. And then you got to find a way to communicate with the market, prospect, pre-qualify them against a set of criteria that you know is a good fit for your organization. And then positioning those new business opportunities for your estimators to look at, for your people to find, to develop solutions that are useful to that particular prospect. So these micro systems, in my view, need a lot more attention to detail. We need to map them out. We need to measure them. And we need to have, as best we can, dedicated people working in these areas. So let's dive in just a little bit on some tips, I think, to diversifying your customer portfolio. The first, as I said, is strategic focus. So get the best folks you have around the table at your organization and talk about the different markets that whether it's metal fab or whether it's automotive or aerospace or medical. Think about the attractiveness of those markets. Do they have some legs? Are they going to grow more than 3% a year? Can we penetrate them? What is their attractiveness? Low, moderate, high? And then think about your value to the market. What is your competitive advantage in those various spaces? Is it weak, comparable to your competitors? Is it a really strong competitive advantage that you have? I think it's really important to understand where you fit on this grid based on the markets. So maybe in automotive, you have a very weak competitive advantage. And maybe your portfolio is very concentrated there. But maybe the chance for you to diversify into another market and you feel like your competitive advantage could be better, you can diversify your customer base into that market. You can have more differentiation and have a little bit more power in the relationship. So strategically be thinking about, where am I going to invest? Where am I going to divest? Where am I going to monitor my investment in these markets? And how am I going to build my competitive advantage, my differentiating factors that, as I said earlier, those value propositions, so that I can, obviously position the organization in the best potential way to strategically grow. So think about this grid, think about who it is you want to do business with, how you stand out, what's your differentiating factors, and then penetrate those. And again, I don't think it needs to be 10,000. I think it needs to be 200. Build your ideal customer profile. This comes from Miller Heiman Strategic Selling. Look at the best customers that you have and what are the characteristics or traits of those best customers that you have. They buy certain things, they do releases, they pay their bills on a certain schedule, whatever it might be. Look at the characteristics or traits of those top 5 customers that you have, and let's go find more of those. And then I throw it in for, it can be useful, who are some of those C clients that maybe are a little bit more of a hassle, really tough for us, lower margin, don't pay their bills, don't necessarily fit what it is that we do. what are the characteristics or traits of those? And then, obviously the antithesis of that is what we want. We want to flip those and get into an ideal client profile. Pretty easy exercise. Again, 3 or 4 people around a table. You can do this and you begin to come up with the description of who it is that you really want to do business with. Brand engagement. First, I want to talk a little bit about quality. One of the first things we do at Coact when we start working with a client is we look at the brand image itself, the website, your emails, your invoices, your proposals or quotes, estimates. I want to make sure that the brand is being represented cleanly, professionally, consistently across the board. So yeah, I'm kind of a stickler with this stuff, but I think you really need to be. Let's not stretch the logo. Let's not use different logos. It would surprise you how many times I'll meet with 3 or 4 people from an organization and they'll all hand me their business cards and have 2 or 3 different logos, color sets, things like that. I think it's really important to have that stamp that is the visual look of who you are, but also the way you speak to the market. So brand engagement, I think, starts with, first of all, understanding the quality of your brand. Again, all the way from your online digital presence to the invoices that you send out, certainly the proposals that you send out. So brand awareness is useful, but really no longer sufficient. Now content really has to cause the prospect to engage. So all the research is out and all of our analytics are really reporting that the visual arts are just taking off. Anything in video, especially if it's a 30-second, 60-second, 90-second video, whether it's about your process or it's customer advocacy, maybe it's one of your customers saying pretty words about you on video, or your business leaders talking about your mission and your core values and what makes you special, the value, again, of your organization. We've been using video a lot, but building brand awareness is, that's okay, but I really think the market now is wanting to be taught something they don't know. They're afraid that there's something in the market that they should know that they don't know. So we like to say teach, tailor, and take control. So first we like to do is we like to teach. And so teach that market what you know about their business. Again, I think understanding the industry is useful, but I think today's business leaders, business growth leaders, they not only know the industry, but they know what they can supply, but they know who they're supplying it to, the problems that they're having, particular industry that they compete in, their competitors. So I really think that teaching is really important today. So video, white papers, other educational content, even third-party stuff's good. Think about it. It's kind of mind-boggling, but if you were born, maybe before 1970, like me, every marketing department today is now like a newspaper editorial desk. I mean, if you think of the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune years ago, I mean, the power that they had to hit audiences with stories and messaging was, very unique. Only broadcast news could do it. Well, today it's obvious to you now when you think about this, but our marketing department, we have 8 or 9 brilliant people in our marketing department, and we do video and graphic design and email and social media for our clients and digital marketing. They have the power that's probably greater than what the New York Times was 30, 40 years ago. The power to shape and distribute messaging it's just prolific today. And that's good. That's really good because it gives us a lot of power, but it's bad if it's not good. I mean, if it's not good quality. So what's really important today is it's one thing to just get messaging out. It's another thing to get really good quality stuff out there that's teaching people, that's changing the way they think about your organization and your brand. Always include a valuable call to action, some opt-in option. Anything you can do. I mean, we give away books. We invite people to webinars. We try to make sure that there's always something for them to want to engage with the brand, to learn more, right? We're trying to tailor it for resonance so that the message kind of speaks to them a little bit. And we're trying to create for our clients, when we're working in the market for our clients, we're trying to create those opportunities for the ideal customer profile to opt in. And then look at different platforms for different audiences, all built around your brand standard. When I say different platforms, I mean, it's like I said, email, customer advocacy, video, social media, maybe it's speaking engagements for some, whatever it might be. Try to find different platforms to teach and tailor your message and get that brand engagement up. Fourth, if you're really looking to try to diversify your customer portfolio, I talked earlier about timing. You need to create waves in the market. These white boxes are nodes that would indicate interactions, if you will, with a prospect. So make waves in the market. Don't just like send out a Christmas card and think that you're marketing. You're not. You have to create 8, 10, 12 interactions per prospect, per ideal customer profile, right? So you've done your strategic work, you've determined who you want to do business with. Now we're making waves with those people that are decision makers inside those organizations. Introduction phone call, send a letter, make another follow-up, go into the next wave. Maybe, today I will tell you, I'm a big fan of postcards. It's old school, but people are looking at them again. There's so much email that's going out. It's becoming a little noisy in our inboxes, and very few people are really opening emails anymore from people they don't know. So we're kind of going back to postcards, and we're getting some really good conversions again with direct mail postcard. I like postcards better than envelopes. Usually after the first envelope, we do send an introduction letter typically, and it gets good results. But after that, people don't open them. So I like postcards because it's direct mail, billboards, if you will. It's got the brand on it. It's got the messaging. It shows the professionalism of, maybe there's something provocative that you can say or a little bit edgy to get someone's attention. Make a phone call about a value proposition of your organization. Mail out a handwritten card. We do hundreds of handwritten notes a month for our customers. When we do our work, we are our customers. Nobody knows coax, so we work on our customers' paper. And we, with their logos and their business cards, we write a note, say, sorry, I missed you, Joe. Hope we can connect next week. Thank you for your interest in our organization, Mark. And those handwritten notes will get responses. I always tell people, if you write one handwritten note a day, you'll lift your organization. You will diversify your customer portfolio. If you wrote one a day, just put it on the top of your desk, and I talk about this when I talk at FabTech, and I probably will again this year. Put one on your desk every day, and by the time you leave, make sure it's gone, that you've sent a note to somebody that says thank you, or you'd like to meet them, or it was nice that they took you to dinner, or whatever it is. Send that note out, and you'll create lift and diversify that customer portfolio. So again, make waves in the market. You got to have regular interaction. And again, that's to eliminate that variable of timing. You don't want to be forgetful. You want to be memorable. And the only way to be memorable with your brand is to create waves, regular interactions. Everywhere in your organization that it's important, accounting, purchasing, work in process, you keep score. You keep score sometimes hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. If you really want to drive up your revenue, and if you really want to diversify your customer portfolio, keep score. How many estimates does it take? How many calls does it take to get an estimate? How many interactions? Out of every estimate, how many of those do we win? Out of those wins, what's the value? Keep score. If you keep score of this stuff, it will start to drive up. Just like on your walls on your manufacturing plants that I see every time I visit your facilities, you have copious scorecards on various work in process, again, raw materials, inventories, rework, scrap, all of those things. Keep score. The reason you keep score on those things is because they're important to the success of your organization. I would argue that this is one of the most important microsystems that you can manage. Keep score. How's it going? How many interactions have we had? What coverage do we have with the 200 that we've targeted that we want to do business with? How many even know us? 40, 60, 80? Keep score. Process trumps technique, and you kind of picked this up already through this webinar. But as we end, I want you to really think about this, that again, almost everywhere in your organization, you have a process orientation. Well, this picture is just an example, but business growth has a lot more to do with process than it does technique. What that means is it's not about the firm handshake and the trial close, hard close, soft close, open-ended questions, closed-end questions. Those things are kind of interesting, but they really are not that useful when it comes to really strategically growing your business. You need to design, install, and manage a process of interaction with prospects that fit your strategic profile based on the value propositions and your competitive differentiation that you have, and build a process that helps you identify where you're at. Do you have their attention? Have you built their interest? Are you in discovery and working together? Is there an opportunity, etc.? Have a process and then create waves across that process. Going to be hard to do this if you don't have, some of you may not even have a CRM, customer relationship management system. It would be really hard today, in today's world, to imagine an organization that in their accounting department doesn't have accounting software, or in purchasing, and now you've got ERP and you've got all these things that you're doing. But boy, we just really need to get better at business growth process, and that includes CRM and understanding not only the organizations that you're targeting and want to be friends with, but the buying influences, decision makers, titles, emails, phone numbers. You got to have a place that keeps track of all of that, and the conversation records. How many quotes have you issued to them? How many have you won? What's the value of what you've won, etc. So process trumps technique. Get into the process of business growth, design it and manage it. Lastly, when do you start? When do you stop? I always say start today and never stop. You really, again, in any other process in your organization, you would never think, we have enough money now, we don't need to count it anymore, accounting. We don't need accounting people anymore. We got plenty, so we don't need them. But it's funny to me in sales, we'll go through a year where we have 5, 6, 7% growth. We do have maybe utilization issues, but we say we don't need any more business. Well, I don't know. I think that's an operational issue. I'm an entrepreneur and I've never been in a business where I didn't need more business, want more business. So I think you got to have unyielding dedication to the process. You've got to care and feed for it every day, and you never stop. There's no core process in your organization that you would ever consider retarding or stopping. I think this is one of those. I think that the business growth processes to diversification of your customer portfolio has to be on every day. There have to be dedicated people, processes in place, and a performance management system wrapped around that. Never stop. I did mention I'll be speaking at FabTech on Wednesday, November 7th. If you're going to be there, I hope you'll come join me. I actually have 2 sessions on November 7th. One's at 9 a.m. We're going to talk about kind of what I was just talking about a little bit. What are the strategies for growth in a bustling economy? We've got more than we could handle. What do we do next? I always say the best time to grow your business strategically is when you don't need to, meaning you've got enough business. I think it's time to get really strategic. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that and how to break down your portfolio, clean it up, in an up economy is the time to prune, if you will, and try to elevate or improve the quality of your customer base. So come see me at 9 o'clock on the 7th if you're there. Later that morning at 11:30, going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts. You got a taste of it today, but performance management of the sales and marketing functions. I'm going to go through the processes of sales and marketing and how to build those out like you would again on the supply side of your business. And then this year we're really excited. We're hosting a hospitality at 5:30 on the 7th. It's across the street from the convention center. If you don't make my sessions and you're interested in having a beer and some pretzels and shaking a hand or two, come on by. We'll be there 5:30 to 7:30. We'll have some fun gifts, and we'll talk more about business growth. Thank you for joining me today with this Business Builders. I hope this helps. Concentrated client base, not necessarily bad. It's a little risky. If you're trying to diversify, I think the point is you got to build a process to do that. The culture, the structures, the processes that got you to where you are may not be the ones that are going to get you to where you need to be. So think about it. I hope a couple of seeds were planted today. If you'd like to talk more and you're at FabTech, I hope you'll come see me on November 7th. Thanks again for joining us.